The conflict in Syria has produced a vast amount of open source information. Hundreds of YouTube channels have posted 500,000 videos from the conflict so far. Hundreds of Facebook pages belonging to all types of groups in Syria have made millions of posts, and this information can be used to build a greater understanding of the conflict. Over the last 2 years, I've developed a variety of techniques using freely available tools to make sense of this wealth of information. We'll take a look at a number of examples that demonstrates the kind of work that's possible with this information and some of the techniques I use. Over the last 2 years, I've collected over 1,000 YouTube channels used by both sides in the conflict, which I check on a regular basis. Some channels belong to armed opposition groups, frequently with Facebook pages and Twitter accounts associated. Here's one example, the Martyrs of Mahim Brigade, which has a YouTube account and a Facebook page where it regularly posts updates about its operations. Here we have the Twitter account belonging to the media centre of a small town of Kafazita, which has posted many reports about the use of chemical barrel bombs in recent weeks. We also have social media channels from the other side of the conflict. For example, this video, posted on the YouTube channel of the Syrian government's National Defence Force, shows their various operations and gives some insights into the equipment they have. Other groups that are active on social media include Hezbollah and the Iraqi Shia militias fighting alongside the Syrian military. This isn't something unique to the conflict in Syria either. Here we have an example of one of the many Facebook pages from Iraq posting information about the ongoing fighting there, and a huge amount of video footage is also being posted from the ongoing situation in Ukraine. For example, here we have the same incident filmed from multiple angles, showing Ukrainian armed forces shooting a journalist. In a world where the internet and mobile technology is spreading, and where smartphones are becoming increasingly widespread, we've been offered a new insight into conflicts across the world. So what can we do with this technology? One thing I've been keeping a close eye on is the arms and munitions used in the Syrian conflict. On July 10th, this video was posted online by activists in Hama, showing piles of unexploded cluster bomb submunitions. This was the first evidence cluster bombs were used in the conflict, but in the 3 months following the first appearance of cluster munitions, only a handful of new videos were posted online showing cluster munitions. That all changed in October 2012. In one day, a dozen videos showing cluster munitions were posted from locations across Syria. The next day, a dozen more. Then each day after that, more and more videos from across Syria. It was clear something had changed in the air war, but the Syrian government denied the use of cluster bombs in Syria. Obviously, the use of cluster bombs was a serious issue, and what I had was hundreds of videos showing cluster bombs being used across the country. Working with Human Rights Watch, I put together a spreadsheet with all the videos showing the date, location, type of munitions, and other information. And from that, Human Rights Watch put together maps showing the use of cluster munitions across Syria. But it didn't stop with the first wave of cluster munitions. For example, here we have a video of SAB 2.5 cluster submunitions being deployed, a type of thermite-based incendiary munition which appeared after the initial wave of cluster bomb use in October. In this video, we see the remains of a cluster rocket launched by the BM-30 Smerch multiple rocket launcher. What's interesting about this video is it wasn't known that the Syrian army actually had BM-30 multiple rocket launchers until this video appeared online, and it was possible to identify the munition. The identification of this rocket was a small investigation that drew on open source material. As you can see from this composite of the rocket, it was in a pretty terrible state. But there was information in the video I could work with. This image shows the nose section of the rocket, and I established the estimated size of the rocket by comparing the length of the shoe visible on the top left of the picture with the width of the rocket. Now that doesn't give an accurate measurement, but the size of a cluster of rockets that the Syrian government might have access to are either 220mm or 300mm, depending on the type of rocket. Based on what I could see in these videos, it was more likely that it was a 300mm wide rocket, therefore launched from the BM-30. But that wasn't enough for a solid confirmation, so I started looking for detailed images of BM-30 launched rockets. It wasn't until I found this image I had what I needed. I had looked at all sorts of reference material, but I found it was lacking in detail. This image, however, had everything I needed. The source wasn't a military reference manual or a subscription-only database, but the holiday photographs of a military buff on a visit to a Russian military museum. These images were such a high resolution I was able to pick out the smallest bolts, as you can see in this comparison. I was also able to look at the small holes on the fuse on the nose section of the rocket. Here we can see a comparison of the entire nose section in the video and the photograph. Here we can see the holes in the support structure of the chamber holding the cluster munitions. Other images from the town attacked with these rockets show the remains of the tail section of the rocket, and eventually it was possible to come up with this image. This shows a diagram of the rocket alongside a composite reconstruction of the rocket alongside the rocket from the museum photograph. By combining this information, it was possible to confirm the rocket as a type launched by the BM-30 Smerch and that the Syrian government was operating a new type of multiple rocket launcher. In August 2012, this video was posted online claiming to show a barrel filled with explosives and shrapnel dropped from a helicopter on a town in Syria. The Syrian Air Force had been deployed for a few months against the opposition forces using a variety of rockets and bombs, but this and increasing numbers of videos showed what appeared to be more and more examples of these improvised bombs, which came to be known as barrel bombs. There was of course some disbelief the professional Air Force would use improvised bombs, as this example, Barrel Bomb Bologna, demonstrates, but I came across more and more footage showing these bombs being used. Videos such as this one even appeared to show barrel bombs being pushed out the rear of helicopters. Still, there was a certain amount of disbelief, but then this video was posted online. This shows the inside of a HIP transport helicopter, with the fuse of an improvised barrel bomb being lit by a cigarette and pushed out the rear of a helicopter. Of course, there's the matter of proving this is Syria, but it's actually possible to match the aerial view of the towns visible in the video to satellite map imagery of towns in Syria. A few weeks later, a helicopter based near Aleppo was captured, and here we have the barrel bombs already prepared for use in the storage area of the airbase. Also from the same airbase, we had this photograph. This shows the trolley system that had been installed into the rear of a HIP transport helicopter, seemingly to make it easier to launch improvised barrel bombs from the rear of this helicopter. This wasn't the end of the story for improvised barrel bombs. At the start of this year, rebel-controlled areas of Damascus and Aleppo began to see intense bombardment from the air with a new kind of improvised barrel bomb. Here we have multiple videos showing improvised barrel bombs being dropped on the district of Daria in Damascus. Here you can see one of many videos showing them clearly thrown from the rear of helicopters. As this bombing continued, it was possible to observe a change in the way they were being dropped, going from one bomb at a time to dropping bombs in pairs. In this still taken from one of the bombing videos, we actually get a good view of the improvements made in the new version of the improvised barrel bomb. There's 3 tail fins to stabilise the bomb as it falls. The front of the bomb has a large fuse plate held away from the rest of the bomb by metal rods, something that's visible in videos showing the unexploded remains of the bomb. Also visible in some videos of the unexploded barrel bombs are rollers that are no doubt added to assist in pushing the heavier barrel bombs out the rear of aircraft. And the story of improvised barrel bombs doesn't end there. Since April 11th, around a dozen new chemical attacks have been reported in a number of towns and villages 50 kilometers apart in Idlib and Hama regions of Syria. In all those attacks, it has been claimed chlorine or ammonia gas has been used in the attacks, with hundreds reported injured by the gas. Videos have been posted online showing the markings on the remains of chlorine tanks reportedly put inside improvised barrel bombs, and some videos and photographs gives a clue to how these work. In this video, we can see an unexploded bomb being taken apart. Explosive deck cord has been wrapped around the neck of the cylinder, seemingly designed to destroy the neck of a cylinder without using the sort of explosive force that would result in large amounts of the gas being destroyed. In this image of another example of one of these bombs, we can see the effect when this works, a small hole blown in the end of a cylinder. Another interesting design element is this metal bar with 2 large bolts. It appears this has been engineered to hold the end of the cylinder away from the front of the bomb, so it won't end up being buried in the ground on impact, stopping it from releasing gas. We can also see on the top left of this picture, there's a vent that has been cut into the barrel to allow the escape of gas. This same arrangement can be seen in videos from other attacks, and strongly suggests that more thought have gone into these improvised chemical weapons than just throwing a chlorine cylinder into an improvised barrel bomb. So by using open source information, most of which has come from social media sites such as YouTube and Facebook, I've been able to track these weapons throughout the conflict, going from barrel bomb bologna to improvised chemical weapons. In fact, in this final barrel bomb video, we're seeing a new twist to the tale. In this video, again taken from YouTube, we see yet another unexploded improvised barrel bomb being taken apart by opposition fighters. Except these aren't the Syrian opposition, but people fighting against the government in Iraq. And this is one of several improvised barrel bombs dropped by the Iraqi Air Force in and around Fallujah during the recent fighting in the area, with images posted by Iraqis on YouTube and Facebook. With this example, we're looking at something slightly different. What we have here is a series of videos that started being posted at the start of 2013. At that point, I had spent about a year looking at videos coming from Syria, looking at every single weapon that was being used in the conflict. What was very interesting about these weapons is there was something that I'd never seen before in the conflict, and they were all appearing together with the same groups. So it's very unusual for 4 completely new weapons for the conflict to be appearing in one area. So I found out that these were 4 types of weapons. One was a M79 Ossa, another a M60 recoilless gun, a RBG-6 grenade launcher, and an RPG-22. I knew the M79 Ossa and the M60 were both related to the former Yugoslavia. The RPG-22 was used by the Croatian military, and the final weapon, the RBG-6, was a little bit more complex because the RBG-6 is actually a copy of a South African weapon called the Milcor MGL Mark I. And these weapons are pretty much identical. They are a couple of small differences though, one of which is the position of 2 bolts on the RBG6, which you can see here on the left. To figure out which was which, I actually went through a lot of videos showing the grenade launchers until I could actually find one that showed these 2 bolts. And here you have an example where you can see these are visible. So I was able to confirm the RBG6 was the actual weapon seen in these videos. The reason that is important is because the RBG6 is manufactured in Croatia. So we now had 4 weapons that were linked to one country. I started a very basic spreadsheet. It had the video, the date, the weapon type, the group, the location, the region, and a map link to Wikimapia. So what this allowed me to do is sort of get an understanding of who was getting these weapons, do some research into their background, also have an idea where these were turning up. So the initial wave of weapons appeared to be used in a battle by several groups in a place called Basar al-Harir, which was a government stronghold at that point in time. And it became very clear the vast majority of these weapons were coming into the south of the country. So I approached the New York Times with these details, and they were very interested in this, and they actually took this information to various officials in various governments and various NGOs, and they managed to discover that these were actually weapons that had been purchased by the Saudi government, flown to Jordan, and then smuggled into Syria. And this was the first sign of an effort to arm the Syrian opposition with weapons from Croatia. But there's plenty of information you can get from social media about weapons used in Syria. In fact, these photographs posted by the Al Anbar Twitter account actually belong to the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham and actually show them operating in Iraq. And there was one picture in particular I was very interested in, because in this one you can see a rocket being launched, and the launcher being used is actually an M79 Ossa, the weapon provided by Croatia to the Saudis to be flown over to Jordan for the Free Syrian Army. And this was proof that these weapons that had originally been intended for moderates in Syria had managed to reach the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham and were being used in Iraq against the Iraqi army, which was obviously quite a significant development. There's other groups that have received these weapons that weren't initially meant to have them, including the Islamic Front, who have benefited from a number of weapons. In fact, this image is quite interesting because on the bottom left-hand corner you can see their Facebook account and their Twitter account for anyone who wants to follow them, and they're also in English. I've also been able to track some of the other weapons that have been arriving in Syria. For example, this still from a video shows the Syrian Revolutionaries Front, a moderate group who has received HJ-8 Chinese anti-tank missiles, firing one in the south of Syria. But we also have this picture from the Islamic Front, showing them with these HJ-8 anti-tank missiles, which obviously isn't the group who was supposed to receive them in the first place. So we can already see these weapons are spreading beyond the groups who were intended to receive them. We also have images now of US TOW anti-tank guided missiles, and what's been quite interesting is earlier reports claimed that they were only being received by the Hazam movement, another moderate group in the north of Syria. We also have videos showing them being received by other groups, including the Yarmouk Brigade, the Omari Brigade, and the Martyrs of Mahim Brigade, all 3 of which are based in the south and are all part of the Syrian Revolutionaries Front and associated brigades. So we can see from the videos that are coming from Syria there's much more to these stories than are actually being reported in the press. Another thing that was quite interesting is one of these videos actually showed a close-up of the markings on one of these US anti-tank missiles. And you can see in this image that they've actually tried to scrub out the serial number. But with a little bit of simple video editing, no more than downloading the video, opening it up in a free media player and adjusting the levels, you can actually make the number reappear, 657769. So for those of us tracking these weapons, this is a little bit of extra information that can be quite useful. In these next videos, I'll take you through some examples of geolocation, finding the precise location where videos were filmed using a combination of techniques which can be used for verifying the authenticity of videos and understanding the situation on the ground in conflict zones. The first example I'd like to show you is from TG Libya in 2011. The Syrian opposition had posted this video that shows them reportedly capturing the town. Of course, we wanted to know if this was true or not because it was part of the ongoing conflict and we wanted a good idea of what the situation was like on the ground. So there's a couple of elements in this video that we can take a look at. First of all, we've got the mosque that's quite unique. We can see the minaret and the dome and the shape of the building and the wall below it. We can also see the tank rolling down the street, which shows that it's obviously quite a wide street. So first we want to find a satellite map of TG. That's obviously quite easy to do because we've got Google Maps and anyone can find these sort of maps now. So here we have the map of the city. We can zoom in and have a good look at the main road running through the city. That shows it's obviously quite wide, it's 2 lanes of traffic. So now we want to look for a mosque that might be on that road. So you can scroll across the map and easily find this mosque that stands out among all the other buildings. Here we can see that it's got a dome, we can see it's got the minaret, we can also see the shape of the building and the wall that's next to it. Judging by this picture, the person filming it would be stood on the north side of the road, looking west. And we can also see the curve of the road as the tank drives by as well. So this is a pretty basic example where we can get a clear idea of the location. This next example is from Brega, Libya in 2011. This example doesn't have the big landmarks that you might see in the other videos, but there is something that's quite useful that might not immediately be obvious. We have this video where this rebel is walking through the city, showing us the various buildings, but what he's also showing us is the road layout. So we can have a quick look at the various locations in Brega that might be a possible match for this area. So we have one area that's mainly apartment buildings. We can clearly see in the video that these aren't apartment buildings, so we can discount that area. There's then two residential districts, one that has very straight roads, one that has very curvy roads. And that's important because we can actually draw out a map of the roads based on what the guy in the video is showing us. So as he's walking around, he's looking at roads, he's looking at junctions, you can see the shape of the roads, and we can actually draw this out as a pretty basic map. But that kind of gives us a key to fit to the lock in a way. We need to find this road layout in the maps we've seen before. So we can actually search through these maps and actually find a perfect match for this area. Then what we can do is go back to the video and watch it through again, and when the camera's pointing in a certain direction, we can see, okay, can we see these items in this direction? So for example, near the end of the video, he has a look in this open area where you can see two walls either side, you can see the garage at the end, and that's a pretty clear example that this matches to what we expect to see. This next example is from Rabat in Egypt on August 14th, 2013. This was from when protest camps were being cleared by the Egyptian government. And what we have here in this video is there's a young woman filming, and you'll see she actually gets shot while she's filming the video. So we wanted to know if this video was actually from the location it claimed to be. So in this video, we've got very little information. All we have is the apartment buildings across the road. It's obviously a major road. We can see an antenna in this distance, and we can also see the corner of a building all the protesters are stood next to. So we start off by drawing a pretty basic map, and you can see here I've drawn a very basic map just to show you the small amount of detail you actually need when you're looking for some of this stuff. Here we have a map of the local area, the Rabat Mosque, which is where the protests were centred, so we can start searching around this area to see if there's anything that matches. On the satellite map imagery, we can see areas like this, where on the left-hand side we have various apartment buildings, we've got quite a wide road. On the left we have a number of buildings that are quite far apart. They're too far apart for what we've seen in the videos. On the right we have buildings that are closer together, but there's a lot of trees in the middle of the road, and that would be very visible in the video, and we can't see that. What we do have is this area which shows 3 apartment buildings, a road that's very similar to what we're seeing in the video, and on the top left corner there's a very small structure, so we can actually compare that to what we've got in our diagram, and you can see the front of these buildings are actually quite a close match to what we can see in the video. We can also see the small structures in about the correct position as well. We can actually visit a site called Panoramio, which shows various photographs that have been geotagged to locations across the world, and we can actually go to this very location and see if there's any images that might match what we can see in the video. And what we have here, we have a picture that I found that seemed to be showing something that could possibly be the view from the other side of the road. So I went and I took a look at the photographs this guy had taken, and I started cycling through them. And here you can see on the top right corner, you can see different examples of photographs he's taken. So you can cycle through these, and eventually I came across this photograph. You can see in the background there's a small building, and if you look very closely at that building, you'll actually see it actually matches the small building the protesters are stood next to. You can actually see the same pattern of paint damage, and you can see the same white sign and the same concrete lip around the top of the building. So in fact, I've been able to find the precise location the woman was stood when she was shot. So that's very useful for confirming this video was something that was genuine and shot in that area. So next I'm going to look at the August 21st sarin attacks in Damascus. At the time of the attack, we really had very little details of what was going on the ground apart from what was being posted on social media. So we had a large number of videos, we had photographs, we had reports on Facebook. What we also had were images of the munitions used. They were quite interesting because these were munitions that no one had really seen before. So in this video you can see the various weapons that had been used, and you can see they all look very similar. So the images showing several examples of these rockets, and most people hadn't seen these rockets before, but I had actually seen them used in previous attacks. So here we've got an example from August 21st in the top left corner, but also one from August 5th in a place called Adra, also in Damascus, one from June 6th, again in Adra, and one from Daria on June 4th, 2013. So these were something that had been used before. They'd been linked to previous alleged chemical attacks, But we still didn't know anything about them. No one had seen these before. They weren't used by any military in the world, as far as anyone was aware. Shortly after the attack, I was contacted by activists in Damascus, and they asked me if there was any way they could help me. So I asked them to take photographs of any rockets they could see. What they sent me was a series of photographs that showed various parts of the rocket and other important details of the rocket. Using these images and working with Human Rights Watch, we were able to put together a diagram of the rocket that showed how we believed the rockets to function. We had measurements of the rocket, so we knew how large they were. We had an approximate idea of the warhead and how much chemical agent it could hold. We also realised that the design pointed towards it carrying a liquid payload rather than a gas payload. There were also other munitions used on August 21st. Here we have an OPCW inspector examining the remains of a rocket. I wanted to know how large this rocket was, so I did something that was quite simple. I edited the picture and I cut out the tape measure he was using. I then positioned it so I could use it as a tape measure to measure the rocket. I discovered the rocket was 140mm wide, and as I knew this was an artillery rocket, that gave me a very small selection of rockets to examine. One rocket that I believed it could be was an M14 artillery rocket, and I managed to find a diagram that showed both the nozzles and the markings on the rocket, which you can see here. The number of nozzles matched, the markings also matched, and it seemed almost certain this was an M14 140mm artillery rocket. One of the potential warheads for the M14 140mm rocket was a sarin warhead. So already we had an idea that this could have been one of the munitions used to deliver the chemical agent on August 21st. After months of research, it was actually possible to find out a lot of details about these weapons. For example, I discovered the name of the rocket was Volcano. There were several sizes, including a 107mm motor type, a 122mm motor type, and a 220mm motor type. I also found out that the 107mm motor model was introduced to the Syrian government by Hezbollah. I also was told that the larger types were actually developed by the Syrian government due to the performance of the smaller type. In these images, you can actually see along the bottom images of the launchers, and these launchers are all from pro-government sources, not from opposition sources, and they provide a huge amount of extra detail about what these rockets actually are. Eventually, we actually started seeing these rockets appear on pro-Hezbollah sites. These two pictures are from the Yabrid offensive, which took place in 2014, and show Hezbollah members with the Volcano rockets and launchers. The Volcano rockets were so essential to the offensive that they actually appeared in pro-Hezbollah propaganda after the attacks, which you can see on the bottom left-hand corner in this image. I was also very interested to find out where these rockets had been fired from. So here we have a picture of the White House map that was provided with their report on August 21st. You'll note that some of these areas are marked as opposition dominant and regime dominant, and other areas are marked contested. But there's really not enough detail here for me to really do what I wanted to do with this map. So I started taking a look at videos from both the opposition and the government, trying to figure out where the front lines were on August 21st. In this sequence, you see several attacks against one location, a checkpoint. And this checkpoint appeared to be quite close to where the rockets may have been launched from. So I wanted to investigate exactly where this was. In the videos, we can see the checkpoint next to a bridge. We can also see 3 mosques and a mountain range in the background. So the first thing I did, I went to the location I thought it might be, and I went to Google Earth. I placed the marker on Google Earth on the ground, pointed it towards the direction I thought the camera was pointing, and checked the topography of the 3D models in Google Earth. And you can see here that the mountain range on Google Earth matches very closely to what we can see in the video. Here I've marked the position of 3 mosques and what they look like. We can see the mosque to the north has the green dome that can also be seen in the video. In the distance we can also see Tishreen Military Hospital, which is a very large and distinct building. So already we have a very clear position of where this location could be. Using this information I was able to mark a series of checkpoints in the area. So the one I was just looking at is in the underpass location to the north. There's also one at an area called the Electricity Station and one called Tommy. The Russian language news channel Anna News recorded a series of videos with the Syrian government forces in the months preceding the August 21st attacks. In these videos we can see the government forces clearing an area between Jabbar and Kobani in Damascus. This is quite an important area because it appears this could have been the location where the August 21st attacks were launched from. In fact, in one of these videos, the commander of the forces states the objective of the mission is to establish a bridgehead where they can attempt to encircle opposition-held territory. Using the videos from Anna News and satellite map imagery, it's actually possible to map out most of the offensive. This image was created by examining satellite map imagery and comparing it to what was visible in the Anna News videos, from which I was able to tell the position of the cameras, the position of the troops, and the positions they were firing on. In total, there were 25 videos posted by Anna News showing this offensive, and from that we were able to establish the area of control for the Syrian government on August 21st. Marked in green in this map is the area I believe the Syrian government controlled on August 21st, based off images posted by both sides in the conflict. I used the same techniques to find the precise locations of several impact sites on August 21st as well. So here we have a very basic example where I found the position of the rocket using satellite map imagery and a combination of videos and photographs from one impact site. Based on that, I was able to find the precise location of 5 impact sites. I was also able to mark the 2-kilometer range from the rockets and the 2.5-kilometer range. The range of 2 kilometers and 2.5 kilometers is based off a variety of information from a number of sources, but we can see that in both instances, those markers lie inside government territory. Here's the White House map, and I've marked the location I've just shown you inside the red box. On the top left, you can actually see there's no indication of who controlled that territory. So even the White House map in their build-up to the conflict didn't know who controlled that territory. So I think this gives a very good example of what you can actually do with this information. So that concludes the presentation. Hopefully this gives some insights into what's possible with open source information in conflict zones, and I thank you for taking the time to listen.